So in this video, I want to show you how you can create and enable an app that saves an index of the user's personal content into Spotlight's index, so they can easily search for content from your app and all around their phone using Spotlight in iOS 9. So this is the app we're going to create by the end of the video. As you can see, it lets us create a note with a title and body text. Lets us save that note. We can go back and our note will appear in the list. If we go Command Shift H, we can go to the home screen, we can pull down and we can title, search for our note, open our app back up straight from Spotlight, and of course finally we can also delete notes from our app. So to do all this, we're going to use the core Spotlight framework and APIs, which is perfectly suited to building apps like this that store personal information, and is used for the Messages, Notes, and Emails app built in with iOS. If you're building an app that handles more general or public content, like a news app that handles a bunch of different articles, or an app like Airbnb that handles a bunch of different available rooms, you're better off using an extension to handoffs and as user activities. It indexes every screen in your app and the content that it contains. So let's get started. I already have a single view application template created and set up. I'm going to open the storyboard file and delete this blank view controller. I'm going to open up. Okay, now I'm going to drag in two table view controllers. Okay, now I'm going to drag in two table view controllers. 1, 2. And I'll just move those around. Oh, look a bit better. And I'm going to embed the first table view controller in a navigation controller. The navigation controller needs to be made the initial view controller for our whole app. So when our app opens up, it will go into this navigation controller, which will then bring up our table view controller. I'm going to drag a bar button item from here into the first table view controller up here, and I'm going to change it to the type add. Of course, this is going to be the button that we use to create our notes. So the next thing I want to change is the type of row that we have. So to keep things simple, I'm going to use a default row here in iOS, and I'm just going to use the subtitle style. As you can see, we get a title, which we're going to put the title for our note in, and we get a subtitle where we'll put a little preview of our notes body in. So that's the first screen of our UI setup. Now let's move on to the second screen, or at least linking and segueing to the second screen. So I'm going to Control drag our button to create a show segue from the add button. Now I'm going to Command drag from the table view cell again over here to get a segue for when the row is selected. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is add our save button in here. Now if we just drag an item in here, as you can see it puts it down the bottom in this tab bar, which isn't what we want. So I'm just going to Control Z, and I'm going to cheat a little, and I'm going to copy the navigation item from this first view controller, and I'm just going to paste it into the second view controller. So that gives us a button already, and I'll just select that button, make sure there's no actions on it, shouldn't be. Select the button again and change its style to save, which is of course the type of button we want. So the rest of this table we want to use to make our UI that we saw over here in our demo app, this sort of title body and our body. The first thing we want to do is change the type of table we have from a dynamic prototypes table, which is a table that's filled in with data from our code, to a static cells table. Oops, that was the wrong one. Sorry, that was the wrong table selected. When I select this table, go here, do the same thing. And there you have 3 rows that are static whenever we start our app. Now, I want to increase the number of sections to 2 because we're using each one of these is going to be its own section. And I want to change the style from plain to grouped. As you can see, that looks a lot like our UI now. We just need to change the number of rows we have in this section to 1, not 0, 1, and we do the same for this next section. And we're going to make this second row down here 200 high. There. Okay, we'll change our title of our first section to title. And the title of our second section to body. Okay. And we need somewhere to put text in. So I'm going to use a text. I'm going to use a text field for our title because that's only one row. And I'm going to use a text view, which is many rows and a large clump of text for my body, because the body text can be many lines and can be pretty big. So I'll just size this out. Oh, that wasn't right. Let's make this the right size. And do the same thing with our text field. And we shall add some quick constraints to this. So on either side, of course. And that should also have a horizontal float vertically, sorry. And we'll do the same thing with all the constraints on this second view controller, and I make that 0. Okay, so the first thing I might do is I just delete all this text because we don't want that. And there we have it. We have all our pretty basic UIs set up, and now we just need to add our view controller class files. So while creating those two view controllers, I'll just make sure my storyboard file is selected so we know where it's going to save the files. And I'll go File, New File, get a Cocoa Touch class, and we want it to be a UI table view controller, and I will give it the name, I'll name the listing one listing, and we can just save it there. That looks good. And wait a second for all that to think about it. We'll go File, New File again, and Cocoa class. And the second one I will call Editing. This will be for the editing screen. Okay, go OK. We have our two files. We'll just link those to our UI. So listing, we'll go listing. And for the editing, I'll go editing. Ooh. Yeah, so here's our two UIs connected up to our view controllers. So that's a good portion of the groundwork for our app done. Now, before I go any further, I want to address two things. One, I'm going to be storing the list of notes in a NS user default, with each note being an array, with the first object being the title and the second object being the body. It's probably not the best way to store values as it doesn't offer much consistency and stuff, but for this video, it should work pretty well. And number two, I'm going to be building out my note creation and editing stuff first. If you have no interest in this, you can just skip ahead until you see me run the emulator once and start seeing me working with something called Core Spotlight, because that's where I'll actually be adding the Spotlight stuff. So first I'm going to start setting up the listing for our notes. Right at the top, I want to create a high level variable. So we'll start here in the list table view controller, go to our assistant editor and close these bars on either side to give us plenty of room. I'm going to start up the top by creating a high level variable called objects, and it will be an array of arrays of strings. I'm just going to create that. So that will set up an empty array of arrays for us. The next thing we want to do is down in the table view, the number of sections in table view. I'm going to set it to 1 because we only have one section, being all our notes. Next up, we're going to look at table view, number of rows in section. Of course, this is going to be the number of notes we have, which is stored in the objects array. So objects.count. That will give us the number of rows we need. And finally, we want to put the value of our notes into the table. Okay, so to do this, first we need to give our row a row identifier. So select our row or our cell, open up the attributes inspector, go down here, and the reusable identifier I'm going to use is note row. Cap lock. Okay, so that will give us a name of our row we can use in our code. I'll just uncomment our table view cell for row at index path and get rid of that. And we will put in our row identifier, row note row, and we will force it to be a UI table view cell. Now that we know that it's going to be of the OS's default cell variable, we can easily access these two objects, the label title and the detail label. So first, let's go cell dot text label dot text, and of course this is the title label of the cell. We're going to equal. We're going to put it in a string just for simplicity. We're going to get our objects array. We're going to get our particular object that we're at. So index path dot row from our objects array, and we want to get the first object within the array and just close our string. That should all be happy. Next up is we want to get the subtitle, and we want to set the subtitle. And our subtitle in our code is called detail text label. We go text again, and we will set that to, fat fingers there, the second objects within that little array. So object 1. That sets up our cell, and we're all ready to go. Next up, we need to load up our data for the NS user default. And usually you do this kind of thing up in the view did load. But because we want to reload the data every time the view appears, I'm going to create another variable just under here called view did appear. And this is where we're going to be loading in all our notes. So now within this, the first thing we want to do is let notes, and we're going to get our notes values out of NS user defaults, standard user defaults, just the standard place you save defaults. We're going to get array for key, and our key is notes. Now, the way NS user defaults works is it either gives you a nil if that value doesn't exist, or the value we want. And because our app might be starting for the first time and we might have a nil, we want to be able to handle that in a way that doesn't just cause our app to crash. So I want to go if notes equals nil. I want to put that empty objects array into our NS user defaults with the key of notes. So to do that, I'm going to go NS user defaults dot standard defaults dot set object for key notes. Oops, that's the wrong way around, sorry. So the object we want to use is objects, and the key is notes. So that will save our empty array into the NS user defaults so that we have it there and we can access the thing and it's easy and works properly. For this else statement, we have the array, and we know that we have an array of values. So I'm just going to set our objects array to equal notes. So we'll put our list of notes in our objects array, and we'll go table view dot reload data. So this will reload the array with our list of tables in it. And this leaves us with one last thing to do on this view controller, and that's to send the potential value of the current selected row to the editing view controller when we select a row And before I can do that, we need to set up a place in the second view controller where we can send that value. So why is this whinging? We want to make that as our little array there. Okay, that should be happy now. And we just, handle all that. Okay, so let's go to our second view controller to set up that place where we can send a value. We want to do it up the top, and I'm going to create a variable where we can send our values into called current index. And I'm going to set the default value of this to -1. That's because an index of an array can never be -1. It's always O and up. This means that if it's -1, we're creating a new node. So that's a sort of easy hack to give away to send that value across. And one last thing I want to do before we set up our sending across is give identifiers to these two segues. So the first segue, which connects to our plus button, I'm going to call, of course you're not there, I'm going to call create segue. And the second segue going from our row, I'm going to call row select segue. Those should be happy. Now we can handle passing values from one screen to the other when a row is selected. Now I'm going to do that down here in the prepare for segue. Just uncomment this. And I'm going to look for a segue with identifier of row select, because that's the only time we need to pass anything is if we're selecting a row, we want to pass the index. Now within here we want to get the destination view controller, so we can pass some values to it. And to get that from the segue, we go segue.destination view controller as editing table view controller, so that we can pass that value in there when we know it's all there. Then we want to go dest view controller dot current index, and we're going to set that to self dot table view dot index index path for selected row dot row, which will give us the index path of the row currently selected, and pass that across to our second view controller. And just to finish up on this screen, I may as well add the code for deleting a row. So to do that, we're going to go up here to the support editing of this function up here, editing view styles. We just uncomment this, and we're going to be looking in here. So the first thing that comment actually has told us to do is delete the value from our data source, which is of course our objects array dot remove at index, and we're going to get the index from the index path dot row. So we'll delete our value from our objects array, and we just want to save the objects array back into NS user default so that delete is saved. So NS user defaults dot standard user defaults dot set object for key objects, and the key is notes. So that's that whole view controller set up. We have the ability to get our notes out, set a row up with our notes, pass our note when selected to the other view controller, and delete a note. So let's go to that other view controller and start setting up creating and editing notes. So the first thing I want to do is have a look up here in the view did load. So we're going to have an if statement here that if this current index isn't -1, we're going to set up the screen with the contents of the current node. So if current index doesn't equal -1, which means it's not a new note, we're going to pull out, let note equal, we're going to pull out our NS user default dot standard user default dot get array for key, the key being notes, and we just want the array at current index, Okay, so that gets out the current note that was passed to us if a note was passed to us. Now we just want to set the title and the body to those. Of course, first we need outlets. So I'm going to select the title, out, and we're going to do the same with the body. So control drag, body, outlet. Okay, so that's happy now. I'll just leave that as it is. It's a bit messy, but it will work. So we want to pass those text values in there. So title outlet dot text equals. We'll create a string just to handle all the downcasting and stuff. We're going to get our note, and because that's array, we're going to get the first value, which is of course our text. Why is this unhappy? Okay, so doesn't want that to be in any type, so I'm just going to put an exclamation point there. That should clear itself up in a sec. Okay, yeah, there it goes. Body outlet, text. And again, we want to downcast it, note. And this time we're getting the second one, which is the body of the note. So we've set up our note. I might just do some housekeeping. I'm going to delete everything below this mark because this all handles both navigation and setting up our table view controller. Of course, we're not setting up a table view controller because we have a static table view controller, so we don't need those functions. The next thing we need to do is create a action for our save button. So command control drag from our save button. We're going to create an action, and we're going to go save press. And this is where we're going to do our saving. So before we can do any saving, we need to get the array of objects that we're going to be saving and editing into. So let's get our, we want it to be a variable objects. We're going to get our array from ns user defaults.standard user defaults array for key notes. Okay, so we have our array of objects, which we can now edit. And I first want to handle if we have a new note, because we want to add that object to the end of the array. And I'm going to do that with an if statement. If current index equals -1. We want to do some stuff for creating a new note. And to create a new note, I want to add it to the end, which means the index will be the length of the array. So current index equals objects dot count, which will give us the length of the array being the current index. And then I want to objects append onto the end of our array a blank note, which will just be a string of 2 empty strings. Yeah, I'm happy to handle that. Okay, so now we have our new note at the end of our array, or just our current note in the array, and we can quickly just change the values of a note at any index by going objects, get our object for our current index, which is our current note. We're going to set that to be an array consisting of our title, outlet text. We want to put an exclamation point at the end just to handle the optionals, and our body, outlet text, and of course an exclamation point to handle the optionals. Why is this unhappy? It needs an exclamation point there for optionals. And finally, we can just save that array back into our NS user default. No, I don't want that. To set object for key. Our object is called objects, and our key is notes. So that's our whole app set up. We are both listing our app, creating and editing our note in here. So let's run our app and see that it all works properly. Okay, so again, we don't have the title anymore, but we do have our app. It listed no objects. We give our title to be title, and we give our body to be body. We go save. And if you want to get rid of that line around the text field, you can just select the text field and go borderless, I reckon that looks better. Makes it look like you're just typing in the row. We can go back and we can see there's our note saved there, and we can just delete it by doing that. So that's our whole app set up. Now we're ready to start adding our core Spotlight APIs to it. And I might start doing that in the editing screen. First thing we need to do before we can work with core Spotlight is import two frameworks. The first is core Spotlight. That's not happy. Alright, GT. And the second is mobile core services. Now, core Spotlight is of course the Spotlight framework and all the APIs for that, and mobile core services is the defaults for our core Spotlight. So saving and editing are the same. Like NS user defaults, you can just save over the top of your existing index entry, and iOS takes care of the rest. So what we're going to be saving into the index is a CS searchable item attribute set of the content type KUT type text. So we're going to do that down here in the save. I might do it after our NS user default save. But first we're going to set up our attribute set. Don't know if that's spelled right, but it will work. CS searchable, so core Spotlight, CS searchable item attribute set, and we want it to be of the index type KUT type text, and we want to downcast that to a string. So these KUT types are a set of types built into iOS. I'll include a link in the description to the reference for all these types, but as you can see, there's just these files. There are all these types. Of course, you can command click to get some more information about them. So now that we have our attribute set, we can start populating some of the values in it. So attribute set dot title is the first one I want to fill in. And of course, this is going to be the title of note. So I'm going to cheat and go copy, paste. And the second value we want to set in our attribute set is our content description. And we want that to be the body of our text. So it can be the description of our note. So I'll just copy and paste that again. As you can see, there's a couple of other values in attribute sets. I don't have time in this video to go through them, but there's a whole heap of things, like keyword, creation date, and these all build more context into what's displayed in your Spotlight search. And if you're building a big app, you should definitely look at taking advantage of all these other values just to get the most out of Spotlight for your app. Now, the final thing we need to do is set up a CS searchable item and then save that into the core Spotlight index. To do that, we go let search item, I'm just going to call it. That's spelled wrong, SEARCH. And we want it to be a CS searchable item. So just an item which consists of a unique identifier which is unique to within your app, and I'm going to use our current index, and you should be able to identify a piece of value, a piece of content from that identifier, because that's what core Spotlight will send back to your app after the user restores your app from a search. The next is a domain identifier. This is sort of separate sections of content within your app. So if you're running a photo album, each photo album can have a domain identifier, so you can quickly delete and manage all the objects in that domain identifier at the same time. So I'm just going to use, it's meant to be in the reverse domain cycle, so com.mat.note, that works well. And we want our attribute set, so attribute set, which I think is spelled wrong, but that's fine. So we've set up our search item. Now we're ready to finally save this into CS searchable index. CS searchable index dot default searchable index, which is just the default searchable index searchable items. Index searchable items, and this is what you use to save new items, an array of items you can even save into the CS index. So search item, which is going to put into our array, and you can have a completion handler. You should probably have a completion handler to handle errors and stuff, but I'm not going to worry about that in this video. The next thing I want to address is back in our other view controller, and that's deleting a searchable item from the index, which of course we're going to be doing up here. And deleting a searchable item is incredibly simple. We just go, of course we have to add core spotlight to this file, so core spot light, so that we can access all the functions. Why is this on? Yep, there it goes. And down here in our delete row, we're going to go CS searchable index dot default index, so we're accessing the same index every time, dot delete all searchable items. So that's everything your app has put into the index. You can delete them all at once. You can delete all the items with that domain identifier, or you can delete a certain item just with an identifier. That's what we're going to do. Of course, it's an array, and I'm going to turn it into a string, and we're just going to get the current index. So index path dot row, because that's what we're using our identifier. And again, nil to the completion handler, where you should have some sort of error checking. So that's how you delete. That's how you add to and delete from core spotlight's index. As you can see, it's pretty easy. The final thing we need to handle is restoring our app with the current note selected. And that's done with a user activity, just like handoff. Apple seems to be very keen on their user activities at the moment. So of course, just like a user activity, we handle restoring it from the app delegate. Down the bottom, we're going to create a new application function continue user activity. And we're going to look for our particular user activity, which is with an if statement. And we need core spotlight in here first. Import core. We're going to be looking for a user activity called, so we want our activity type, so user activity.activity type. We're looking for one that is CS searchable item action type. That's the type of activity type that is passed back to your app from Spotlight. So return here, just a return true, just so we don't need any error checking for our restoring our Spotlight. And within our if function, I'm going to pull out the identifier, or from our user activity dot user info, and we want that's optional CS searchable activity identifier. So now we're getting that identifier that we saved with the index back to our app, which we can use to ID what we're opening up. And because of some things that have changed with just restoring user activities, I'm going to add a notification to the NS user notification. No, that was wrong. NS notification center, default notification center dot post notification notification name. And I'm just going to post this notification to the notification center, which is an OS-wide thing for your app to be sending notifications to other places within itself. And then when we open up the listing view controller, I'm going to set up that notification, and I'm going to be segueing into our Note app when we call our notification. So our notification is going to be open note, and our object is going to be the identifier. So that will send a notification, which we can handle over here in the listing table view identifier. I'm going to use the viewDidLoad. So ns notification center default. I'm going to add a what do I say? I'm going to add an observer. Add observer for our for that particular notification. So it's going to be in self. It's going to be in the listing table view controller. The selector is going to be open note with that on the end, so it's a function. We're going to be getting our notification called open note, and we do not need to send any objects. I'm going to add our open note function right down here at the bottom. Dot open note, and we want it to accept. Looking through my notification of the type ns notification. So what will happen is this observer, when we open this view controller, this observer will be added. It will pick up, oh, there is a notification being added called add open note, and then it will run open note, our function down here, and pass the notification in here. Then in here we can get I'm just going to hack together this last little bit. It's probably not the best way to do it. There's probably a better way to pass the current index to the other view controller, but this way will work. And this way I'm going to get self table view dot select row at index path. This is basically select the row of the note that was just opened, and then I'm going to perform our segue, and that will sort of be my way of passing the current index to the next view controller. Again, probably not the best way to do it, but it will work, and it will work quite well. So we want for row, we want to get the integer value of our object in our notification. So notification, open a bracket, notification dot object as ns string dot integer value. So that will get the integer value of our note, and we want it to be in section 1. Actually, that's an index, so it will be section 0. Sorry about that. You can set this to whatever. I'm just going to set it to true, and scroll position, again, whatever. It doesn't actually matter. We're not going to see it, but I'll just go middle and handle any problems. Why is that unhappy? Scroll position. That shouldn't be unhappy. Yeah, there it goes. It's all happy now. And finally, we can perform our segue. Self.perform segue with identifier. Row select seg. And we don't need a sender. So this will pick up our notification, select the row of our integer value of our notification index, and then perform our row select segue, opening up our individual note. So let's run our app and see how this all works together. We can create a note. We're going to call this note something, and we can add some body text in here. Save it. We can go back. As you can see, it comes up. And also, if we go Command Shift Home, pull down Spotlight, we can go to some thing. There's our note. We click it, we open it up, and it opens us up back to our individual note. I hope that video is useful. I hope you can see how you can now add Spotlight pretty quickly and pretty easily into your app. And I hope you subscribe to the channel. Yeah, see? Self-promotion right there.